Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Greg Drouillard, president of Target Building Materials based in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Greg is just one of those guys you love to run into at a convention. He is so full of positive energy, you can't help but walk away with a little smile. One of the reasons for this is his desire to remain curious. He genuinely wants to know how you are and what you've been up to. He attributes his leadership longevity to being a lifelong learner and an avid believer in physical and mental fitness. It was great to catch up with him, and I hope you enjoy our conversation. Well, all right, Greg. Hey, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's always a pleasure to get to speak with you.
Well, it's indeed my pleasure, Jason. It's been a long time since we've actually talked, and now I can see you on screen. You're still as handsome as ever.
I know. Hell, I don't know about that. We got that face made for radio here. It's funny that you say that. We're getting now so much more used to seeing each other on screens. This has become a very big part of my life today is, communicating through screens, rather than face to face. So
in our world as well, when you go to Toronto, I'm there a couple times a month from Windsor, which is about a 4-hour drive. So incorporating that with the hotels and everything else, this eliminates a lot of unnecessary travel. And we translate it as this. I just hope we don't get Zoom fatigue so that we get bored of all of this sort of thing.
It's funny you should say that, Greg. A good friend of mine, he shared an article with me about that exact thing is Zoom fatigue. People getting really tired of being on these Zoom meetings 3 and 4 times a day. I think people are craving that connection, the physical, seeing each other face to face. This is a nice second. Don't get me wrong. I do like this. I mean, I'm getting used to it, but it doesn't replace the face-to-face interaction.
Well, the one side of it that I found out since the virus has spread around is the fact that this is 4 or 5 times, sometimes a day, and it's hard to find time to isolate yourself from your staff and your clients and trying to create the relationships that we've spent so many years cultivating. But it certainly is a great alternative, and we're certainly going to use it in our business as well.
Well, and I think it's interesting that, this technology has been around for a long time, and we have been the bottleneck. We just have not utilized it to the way we can today. And I think that actually as a byproduct of this crisis, that we are going to start using this technology more and more and maybe not travel, unnecessarily, as you were saying earlier. Eliminate that unnecessary travel.
Well, the one thing that I think it misses a little bit when you have several faces, sometimes up to 30 faces on the screen, is the body language part of it is kind of lacking. You can't see, so we're studying people's body language, but it certainly is a component of communication that's hugely important.
Well, I think, you and I both talk with our hands a lot. We are gregarious individuals. We like to gesture and we like to, and that's part of the personality. It's part of that relationship. So you're right. I think we do miss a little bit of that, at least with looking at a screen. At least I can see people move and I can do things. Think about the old conference calls, the old telecalls. That was really isolating. That was really limiting. But, this is, again, getting us a little closer to allowing our personalities to come through, even if it is a little bit through the screen.
Yesterday, just for a sidebar, there was a court case going down here in Windsor, Ontario, where the hospital is expected to be about a $3 billion hospital. And there's some people up in the naysaying department that are causing some issues of delaying the approval of the hospital, which coincidentally is about a half a mile down the street from me. And they had an actual court case yesterday that lasted almost the entire day with the judge and all of the lawyers, good and bad. It was fascinating. I kind of dubbed in a few times to see what was going on.
Yeah.
And it is the wave of the future. There's no question about it.
It is, Greg. Well, on the complete flip side of the future, let's talk a little bit about your history and your past. Give me a little history lesson of how you got involved with, you've been in the family business now, multiple decades, sir. I don't want to throw your age at you. I don't want to age you too fast here, but tell me a little bit about how it all started for you.
Well, it's very kind of you to avoid the decade number, but I'm in my sixth anniversary of my 10th birthday. And
Okay.
Kurt, of course, as a young fella, as we all did, maybe yourself as well, is joining your parents or your dad, in my case, who started Target
Yeah.
Building Materials in 1967. And I worked summers for him. I wanted to drive the fork truck. I didn't have a license. I was only 14, 15 years of age, but I sure liked that fork truck. And that's
Oh,
where I got
yeah.
exposure to the building materials world and the colorful industry that we're in. But my lifelong dream was to be an airline pilot. That's what I wanted to do. And I had my dream set upon that when I was just a very young fella. I'm still fascinated to this day of an airplane getting up in the air, how these things get up in this tremendous weight that they are. And
Sure.
when I entered into high school, I had to decide what I wanted to do for a living. So I went to Toronto again, 4 hour drive up the way. I skipped out of
Mhm.
school to go to Seneca College to look into the aeronautical program. And I got some bad news in the sense that, Greg, you don't have 20/20 perfect vision uncorrected.
Oh, okay.
So that
Okay.
kind of threw a monkey wrench right from the get go. And I thought, oh my goodness. So that I had to kind of rearrange my priorities and what I wanted to do, and so as a consequence, I finished high school, went to college, and some night courses at the University of Windsor in business, and so on. And
Mhm.
then what had happened was there was an opportunity at Air Canada where I was employed for about 4 years in the beginning. It was an entry possibility to go into the airline business in another role, which was air freight, air express, and customer
Mhm.
care. And I got my foot back into the door of the dream that I had to be in the airline world, being that I love to travel, still love to travel. Well, not right now, of course,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
we've got some issues out there. But I got into the airline business and I got along. I was ambitious, and my boss liked me, and he's encouraging me to apply for a job in Montreal, which was a place called Placeville Marine, which was Air Canada headquarters. And fortunately, through the interview process, I got to the short list, and my dad found out about it, and he said, "Uh oh, I think I'm going to lose this kid if he gets this job." So we had a meeting, we had a conversation, and kind of a formal thing in his office. And he said, "Greg, I really want you in the business. I really want you to think about it." He says, "You're going to go to Montreal in a French immersion province." And at that time, the unilingual part of it, meaning if you didn't speak French, bilingual, they weren't going to
Right.
welcome you. So as a consequence, I had to make a decision. And I said, Dad, let me think about it for a week. I took the week and I made an appointment with him. And I come back and I said, Dad, I got a proposal. And he says, what? so
Oh.
so I said, I will enter into your business based on a condition. And the condition was that I do something to learn the business every 5 years. I start from the rock bottom and I want to learn the business. I want no favors. I want no stripes on my shoulder until I earn them. And then as my career started up, and I've been here getting back to the age, I've been here 46 years at Target. So, as far as background, I'm quite interested in athletics. I love
Yeah.
reading. I like self improvement. Fitness is probably one of my biggest things. My grandkids are everything to me. That's a little background.
I think a lot of us, went off and tried something else for a little bit. I spent a year overseas out of college, and I pretty much knew I was going to come back to the family business. But I think it is very important that those of us who spent time driving forklifts, prior to our driver's license and getting that taste of the family business, that we leave for a little while. And for me, at least, it really made me appreciate what I had and that opportunity that I had with that family business. Now, you spent about 4 years away from the company. What are some of the things if that you might have taken from that experience with Air Canada and maybe brought with you coming into the family?
Good question, Jason. I think most of that was developing relationship skills and how to communicate and talk to people and understand. Because at that time I was still relatively young man, and I wasn't worldly in the respect of experience in a actually in any kind of a job. So the Air Canada experience for me was extremely important. I learned teamwork, working with different shifts and different people that had a lot more experience than I did in the airline, and it's a dynamic industry. The idea of being in the hustle and bustle of that was appealing to me, frankly. Even though I couldn't be a
Sure.
pilot, I was still involved with that industry. I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I remember, again, back, it's, a few decades ago, back then, leaving the family business. And I think for me, one of the big byproducts of that was just that I knew I could actually make a living outside of the family business, that I actually had the wherewithal to have a career outside of that. And that gave me tremendous confidence when I came back into the family business.
I think I can echo that as well, Jason. I think it's important that when you develop self confidence, it's a tremendous asset to have that you share that with the people that are most important to you in your life. And then the people that maybe not even so important that they can maybe tailgate on your experiences of life. So I echo what you say.
Yeah, I think it's very important. I get asked this question a lot, with people with, their children are in the business or at least dabbling in the business, maybe in high school, maybe in summers during, their education. And, a lot of people ask me, what is the right, when's the right time to bring them in? Should I encourage them to come in? Should I send them away for a little while? And I think it's different for each child, but if I were to generalize, I would say go away for a year. Spend a year away, and if more, great. But at least a year that you get a taste for working for someone away from your family. And I think that's just such a valuable experience that, I've seen others that, they didn't do that. And I think it's difficult when they run into adversity, that they have a tougher time. They haven't learned some of those coping skills or those ability, that ability, and maybe they're less confident when they are faced with adversity.
Entering into the building materials sector at the time, we were a member of a buying group in the United States called the ACDI Group.
Oh yeah, yeah. Tom's group. Yeah, yeah, sure.
A good experience for me. And they had a program that they were trying to encourage that the member that represented ACDI would go to another person's branch and not to visit, to actually work there for a duration of time, 2 months,
Oh,
3 months.
nice. Yeah,
And of course, being from Canada, at the time we only had three members in Canada. And that wasn't possible because of the visas and all this sort of things. We had a member in Mexico, and I thought, geez, that would have been a cool thing to do. Go to Mexico,
sure.
work on my tan.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a good experience way back then with the ACDI group, and did a lot with them.
Yeah, I have always enjoyed my relationship with them. I've spent time with them occasionally back and forth, met several of the members through of ACDI. And yeah, I think that's a great program actually. And I'd love to see it more formalized in other associations as well. And I don't see it, maybe I'm just not privy to it, but I think that is a neat program. In fact, if I recall correctly, years and years ago, I actually hosted, one of good friends, son, and he came out to work with me in Denver for almost a year. And it was the same type of thing. We had said, I knew he was going back to the family business, but while he was with me, hey, I'm going to show him everything I can, let him try anything I can. And then, so I think that is a great thing about those associations and those relationships that you build through those.
They're actually absolutely invaluable, and that goes on with the relationships with all of the associations and buying groups and the things that you and I have had some lifelong experiences with. It's
Yeah.
absolutely a huge ingredient in our lifestyle.
Sure. Speaking of that, you were involved with ACDI. Tell me about, you've been involved on the leadership side of many of these associations, buying groups, trade associations, those types of things. If you wouldn't mind, share with us a little bit about your experience with some of the associations.
Certainly, thank you for asking. My original entry into the participation of buying groups actually stemmed from service groups. Being involved in a leadership position is something I learned actually with I was president of the LaSalle Youth Center, which is a small community that we used to raise money and give those funds to build an arena or a swimming pool or things
Sure.
for the younger people to embark on. And my dad was actually in those associations himself, and I kind of wanted to follow suit with him. So I got my basis of being involved. I'm going to use the term bleacher creature. I never
Yes.
wanted to be a bleacher creature. I wanted to be involved and be on the playing field or on the ice. And we have to have people on the bench. I didn't want to be a bench sitter. And I've always put my hand up to say, yes, I'd like to be involved. And I've learned that so many elite people in business through this experience. And my first experience was with a group here in Canada called TORPSA. That's spelled T as in Thomas, ORBSA. And that's an acronym for Toronto Building Supply Association. And our company's been a member of that group for about 40 years or so. And my
Mm.
dad got me started in that for about a year or 2 years. And then he kind of backed out and let me started attending those meetings. And I was encouraged to put my name on a committee, perhaps a buying committee with insulation or with re-rod
Hmm.
or whatever it might be. And I was quite a shy guy way back then, and it gave me a little confidence to put my foot forward. And then a couple of years later, I was asked to serve on the board of directors, and that was the beginning of my involvement with associations. So now with the Lumber and Building Materials Association of Ontario, which I'm privileged to have been a past chair and director, and I've been involved with the STAFTA, near and dear to me, and the ACDI, as I just mentioned a few
Yeah.
minutes ago, and different service groups. I was past chairman for a community group for the Ontario Provincial Police, actually, and
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
that was pretty cool because it brought me away from my day to day rituals or the similar things that I did day in and day out. It gave me a whole perspective on community life and helping where I live in a little town called Kingsville, Ontario. So currently, right now, I'm at the tail end of my presidency of Torpsa once again, which I've been there 4 times president.
They keep coming, you keep coming back.
So maybe I got something on my forehead that I don't know about.
Yeah, yeah. No term limitations for you. Yeah, no. Just bring you back every time. Uh oh, we're running out of candidates. Well,
Yeah,
you know
where's
what? Greg will raise his hand again.
where's Drouillard?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. We'll get that guy again. We'll get that guy. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I mean, you and I had the privilege of both serving, in the STAFTA organization, and it was a great experience for me as well. But tell me a little bit about where you got in front of all those people, the speech side of it. I mean, this has always
Oh,
been kind of a terrifying thing for many people that are involved with that.
well, again, I took a Dale Carnegie course. Geez, I think I must have been 25 or 26 years of age just to kind of give me a little confidence. I didn't know what it was all about. And I took it. It gave me a little exposure in front of a group, small group, maybe 10, 12, 15 people. So my first STAFTA experience, now we were members of different associations at the time, but I checked out STAFTA way back in the early 90s, 1994, I think it was 95.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
at that time, there was a fellow by the name of Ted Nash who was a president, actually.
Yeah, I remember Ted. Sure, fellow Canadian. Yeah,
Little place called Stony Creek, Ontario, near the. I
yeah,
called him a critiquer. Telephone conversation, and I'd asked Ted about STAFTA, and I explained my business to him, and he says, by all means, he says it would really value your type of company, and of course, I'm pretty interested in being involved with public speaking, so to speak. But what I wanted to say to you, to your question, is that my first one was in Anaheim, and I walked into the room in my first STAFTA convention, and I walked into the convention hall not knowing what to expect. And I saw an array of seats. I've never seen so many chairs in my entire life besides that room that were empty at the time. I just walked in there. I probably shouldn't have been in there, but I walked in there and I saw these seats and I said, there's going to be a person sitting in every one of these seats.
very true. Oh yeah,
And
oh
then,
yeah.
of course, we got to the general session, and I can't recall the public speaker at the time or a keynote speaker, but I was enamored of what that environment brought forward. And then fast forwarding, when I was very privileged to serve as president of staff, as you did, I had part of the responsibilities and privileges of addressing the audience was to have a speech made. And of course,
Yeah.
we had Maury Halverson, who I deeply respect. So we called him the.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I'll never forget the speech process preparing for my speech. And I think I was at that time, I was only the second Canadian to serve as president of staff after 33 or 34 years. And I was so impressed that I was part of the group, part of the crew.
Yeah.
So anyway, fast forwarding to the speech, I asked Georgia Foley, who I have tremendous admiration for. She said, "Ray, you have to go to practice." And I did. And I got up to practice. It's real easy with all of the seats empty. And I think there was around 6, 7,000 people in Nashville where I had to
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah.
So I looked up there, not bad. And all of a sudden, people started rolling in, just attending to the not the actual conference, but they were in the room.
Right.
And I started getting warm. And I said, George, there's someone here I can get a fan. Got to get a fan shooting up at my head. And of course, on the actual day when this event took place, that fan saved my bacon. That was a very important prop for me.
Absolutely. Well, I think, let's face it, it is a daunting task to get up in front, especially if you haven't done a lot of public speaking, as I hadn't much at that time either. And looking at that, 5, 6,000, 7,000 people, however many it was, because frankly, it was dark after about 4 rows. I didn't know how many people were there, and it's a very daunting prospect. But I think both you and I were enamored with the process, and that for me at least, it really launched my career into what I do today. is I was very excited about that. So, one of those byproducts of saying yes in these trade associations, for me at least, was the confidence to be able to try something different and really to learn how to get up in front of people. And it warmed my, I mean, it was one of my favorite things. I couldn't, I wanted to go back up again. When I was done, I was like, I want to go again. Can I go again? I want to go again. So,
That's fantastic.
yeah.
But the association, Jason, I think also, particularly with staff and the idea of having fellow board members who I consider some of the elite people of the entire industry, if not the United States. I get a kind of a kick out of Americans, particularly because you guys will move clear across the country sometimes for your business or your branches and everything else. And here in Canada, we don't even move across the city. It's a big but the Americans, you've got the customer care down to a science for the most part. I've learned
Yeah.
so much, particularly from the associations and particularly with the staff. That's one of my all-time faves.
I tell you, Greg, I think again, that as you had said, rather than being that bleacher creature, getting down in the field or getting down on the ice or again, saying yes when asked to serve, the benefits that you get out of that are so tremendous. And I think, that's one of the things you and I talk about often is, how wonderful that experience was, but it all started with us saying, yes, we're willing to serve.
Very much so. And I think that the idea of being involved with whatever, if it's a civic or local, it could be even just a small group in your own community. It kind of catapults you to another level of confidence, and you can share. The more you give, oddly enough, the more you receive. I think.
I agree with that. Absolutely. If I could take a quick segue here, I want to circle back on something you said. One of the big parts of your life or the hallmark is physical fitness and how that really has not only made you, a better leader in your organization, but really, well, it allowed you to remain standing. I'll put it that way. That's the other thing. If you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little bit about that journey.
Certainly, thank you. I'd be happy to, Jason. And I've been involved with some kind of athletics since I was 8 years of age. Particularly with hockey, was us Canucks. We love hockey, and
Yeah.
that's probably where I got my start being involved with competitive sports and many racket sports I've been involved with. And the idea of athletics brought me to triathlons. I think the first year I did about 8 triathlons in northern Michigan here in Ontario, and a couple years later, I think it was in what was it 2006. I couldn't breathe too good on something. Something wasn't right. I was doing triathlons and I had to stop on the running section. And a friend of mine who was on my hockey team, fellow doctor, I went in for a checkup and I said, Roy, I'm not breathing too good. Something going on. He said, let's get you checked out, just make sure everything's okay. And I did. And I got a phone call on voicemail, if you can imagine. It said, Greg, we want you to stop exercising. And I thought it was kind of a bad joke. I said, "What? Why would you want me to stop exercising? It's something I enjoy." And I called him back, and he said, "We have an appointment for you. We got to go up to Toronto, Ontario. We're going to see a doctor up there on cardiology." And I ended up having an aortic aneurysm. And the aortic aneurysm
Hmm.
is something that could be a fatal situation if it's not treated
Sure.
properly. And thank God I had the intuition to get it checked out because if I wouldn't have, it would have been a bad story. But anyway, there was a fella doctor up there. I can't remember his name outside, but he's a renowned specialist, Tyrone David, Dr. Tyrone David. That's his name. He's a world
Okay.
and he is an expert on a procedure for aortic aneurysms that I had. And when I went to the hospital and I met him after you go through the secretary and get your health card and all that sort of thing, he come out and he looked just like Dr. Marcus Welby, MD, like on TV when we were kids. He looked
Yes, indeed. I remember that show.
I
Yeah.
mean, he had the long white coat, white hair, stately, very
Yeah.
distinguished gentleman, and he had a clipboard. And he says, "Greg, I want to tell you something. You're very, very fortunate to be here. Had you not been in the shape that you are with your athletics and everything," he says, you would be standing before me." And I was numb, Jason. I didn't know what the heck he was talking about. I didn't know how to spell aortic aneurysm, much less understand what it was. And I was numb. So I went through the operation. It was a 6-hour operation, and I went through it. And that coincidentally was the year leading into my presidency of staff. And I was president of Torp that same year. So it was a very eventful year, of course. And then I was
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
able to exercise for about a year, a little bit more than a year. Even walking was difficult. And then finally going through the process, going to cardiologists and everything else, I slowly started walking, started running, started biking, and here I am today, such a lucky person to be here talking to you and whoever's going to be listening to our podcast. And I'm thankful to
Yeah.
God every day that I'm here. And I'll exercise till I'm not here anymore. I enjoy kayaking; is one of my
Yeah.
things to do these days.
Oh,
It's
nice.
peaceful,
Yeah.
and if you want to go in rough water, you can do that too. But I'm not a tightrope
Sure.
walker, so I'd rather just go in normal waters and take care of scenery and my head.
Yeah.
Well, it's almost like a meditation in many ways.
Yeah, and I think, Greg, and that's just, the reason I wanted to bring up that point was that I think that sometimes that when we get involved with our businesses and we, get into that leadership position, that we forget some of those things that we need, the maintenance, the personal maintenance, that we get so wrapped up in our work life. And people talk about work life balance, and I don't know if that's really a great balancing. A friend of mine hates that expression, but taking care of yourself physically so that you can perform mentally. It's such an important piece there.
Well, what's interesting about that statement, Jason, is that I am now contemplating and getting involved with perhaps a meditation and having my mind focus on my mental health a little bit more, especially with the pandemic that we're in right now. There's a lot of
Hmm.
stress out there. My, staff is stressed. My family is stressed. Everybody's stressed. So I'm kind of focusing on calmness and trying to set an example that I can't do anything to solve the pandemic. We'll do what we can. We do the social distancing and all of the necessary slogans that are out in front of us right now. And I think it's going to be a long
Yeah,
haul. It's going to be fast. I do think that mental health is extremely important, getting more important as time goes on. And I want to
sure.
couple that with my physical health, and hopefully we can have a good package.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, that's extremely, because I think again, people will go one side or the other, and they forget about how important it is to, to maintain your health. Because, when you start to feel bad, and you and I have both been in that situation where you're just not feeling right, everything else goes away. Everything else starts to diminish around you, and you're just not at your best, and you can't bring your best. And I think again, as the leader of an organization, whether it is your own or a civic organization that you're involved with, your responsibility is to bring your best. And that's what we are asked to do.
I found a passage many years ago that I live by pretty well every day. It's not easy sometimes, but three words that I try to live my life by is balance, variety, and moderation. And I'm a little heavy on the work side of things. I admit it because I love work. I still love work, but I got to put a little pleasure in there once in a while and go for a kayak ride.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you shared that with me, because, really, I think sometimes that we don't stop for a moment and really think about that balancing, and find those other activities. I will say one of the byproducts of this, pandemic is I found that I can work much more efficiently when forced to do that. I'm only allowed certain hours of the day because my wife and I split child homeschooling duties, which I despise. And I will say it number, I am not a good teacher of children. That's why I teach adults. I don't teach children, but I struggle with that. But since I am limited in my time that I can actually do, work on my business, that I've become much more efficient, so much more efficient. And I think that that's one of the byproducts here, is that I've been able to focus a lot better than I ever have in the past.
So at the end of a work day, whether it be mental and physical, you deserve the sleep, and that's something that also is not. And when they say you have to have 8 hours sleep a night, I don't know how the people do that. I can't get 8 hours sleep. I've tried, and I don't use
Yeah.
any sleeping aids. I won't do that sort of thing. But some
Right.
people go in
Right.
5 6 hours. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I tend to be able to sleep a bit. I can sleep on planes, which is scary. I'm one of those guys who, the minute that I'm on the tarmac and I'm out cold, people hate me around, for that. But
As long as you're not the pilot.
yeah, as long as I'm not the pilot, right? As long as I have no responsibilities, and I have ceded my control to someone else at that point. But no, I think that you're absolutely right. You're looking at the overall picture. The overall taking care of yourself. Not only in the business, but the physical aspect there. Do you have any big pieces of advice? Really thinking about the people that are coming up in the organizations today. They're entering, and they may not even be into their career yet. But I guess why is distribution a good career, Greg? I mean, you've been in it so long, and why stay in this, and why would you encourage someone to get involved with it?
Well, that's another good question, Jason. I think in construction and building material distribution in particular, which I've chosen as my career, as long as they build things, as long as things are demolished, as long as things are renovated, they're always going to need construction products. And when it comes to distribution, there will always be a need. So this is a good career choice for people coming out of high school or post secondary school. The idea of having a trade is becoming quite popular now as compared to having academic credentials of that type of education. I do a little mentoring at the University of Windsor, and some of the young kids coming up are concentrating a lot in the technical, logical side of things with the devices and so on. But with the business and the relationship creation that we've been talking about a little bit today, I think one of the common denominators to me for the successful people out there, and I include my staff and even my family, is the word curiosity. The word curiosity means to me that you care. If you ask questions and you want to learn and you're still thirsty for growing each and every day, I think you have to be curious, and that's one of the attributes I look for in particularly new staff that comes in. Actually, we're on an interview process right now, and one of the ingredients that I like, along with curiosity, is enthusiasm, and you couple that with a good attitude, got a pretty good package. But I do think that we are, we're talking about essential business being in the pandemic, and I think it's a essential business no matter what we do, whether we're in the pandemic or not. So I think the construction and building materials distribution industry is very good. That's how you and I got to meet. That's how a lot of hopefully your people that are listening to your broadcast here, your audience is curious themselves to find out what your guests are talking about. I've listened to some of your guests on previous podcasts, and I've learned from them. Going for my walk in the morning, I put my headphones on and I listen to Mr. Bader.
Well, it's kind of as I shared with you before. It's fun. I've really enjoyed the stories, and I do listen. I hear different things, and I think that's really one of the things that, in fact, the feedback I get. I get a lot of email. People send me notes, and hey, I heard this or I listened to this. And in fact, I had someone take a picture of the podcast on their car as they're driving down the highway, and I thought, well, that's a little dangerous, but
Oh boy.
it was neat though, and they talked about, hey, here's something I heard, and that's really why I did it. That's kind of why, is again sparking people to be learners, to be willing to listen. I've loved the word humility for a long time, just because that ability to grow,
Yeah.
continual growth. And I think that's honestly what a lot of this is, and a lot of these types of mediums, whether you're listening to a podcast, or you're listening to a book on tape, or you're actually deciding to sit down and read. Again, being that lifelong learner and that having that thirst for knowledge, that's a pretty special thing.
Well, along with that, Jason, the word gratitude comes into play as well because I'm very
Yeah.
grateful that, first of all, I'm employed. My goodness, there's so many people, very talented people that are not employed today. And, the idea of trying to set an example of some of the ingredients of success is being grateful. Every morning I wake up, first thing I do, thank you for another day
Yeah.
coming up.
Yep. Oh, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with that. And I watch, a very good friend of mine just recently was laid off. And I think I am so grateful that not many people can fire me. I mean, my spouse can fire me, but beyond that, not a whole lot of people can fire me, right
Oh,
now.
boy.
But there's some power, or there's something pretty magical about that, and I have to be very grateful that I have that ability to continue, my work and make an income.
Well, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to speak with you. And
Yeah.
Jason, it's been a pleasure to have a discussion with you. Very much so, sincerely.
Absolutely. Well, no, it's always my pleasure. And all right, yeah, and I'm not going to let you go without the Canada joke.
Oh,
So
oh,
you got to
oh,
you got to give it to me. This is the one, and this, I know it was many years ago you said that in front of that audience. So
well, I haven't told that joke since then. So I'm
well,
gonna say that what happened with the idea of putting all of the alphabet in a bucket and having the Vanna White of the day pick out a couple of letters, and we'll figure out how we got the word Canada out of it. And she dug down deep, and she dug down. The first letter she come out with C, A, and the next one was N, A, and of course the last one was D, A, and that's how we got our word of our wonderful country here in Canada. And thanks to Vanna White, she did a heck of a job. She's still rolling.
Yes, she is. Absolutely. Well, my friend, as always, such a pleasure to see you. And I'm so happy that, the business is going well and you're still, kicking along in full speed here. So, no, it's terrific to get a chance to see you. And I look forward to the next time our paths cross.
Jason, thank you so much and good luck and best of luck and be safe and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.